It is a quiet time in Star Wars fandom. The prequels are over, leaving only novels and a single cartoon to continue the saga. As fans wonder about the future of the galaxy, a new empire rises. Disney. Taking the reins from Lucas, a gloved white hand with 4 fingers picks through history and lore, deciding what is canon and what is legend. From this comes new movies, books, cartoons, and TV shows. Now, 2 middle-aged guys are left pondering what Star Wars was, what it is, and if it even matters anymore.
Two middle-aged guys try to work it all out. Two middle-aged guys try to work it all out. Two middle-aged guys try to work it all out. Hey everybody, wait, did I just hear a Star Wars crawl?
Yeah, you totally did.
Oh, wow. Well, I guess there won't be any, clever unveiling of the episode subject matter, will it?
You know, I guess people know what we're talking about.
We are talking about opening crawls, and the famous opening crawls in...
And surprisingly, Star Wars is not the best opening crawl.
No, what is? Mad Max? Warriors of the Lost World? The Gummymans have colitis, I believe.
Yes, that's my personal favorite.
Yes. Oh, no, folks, we are talking about Star Wars today. We're getting right into it. We're just, this is a big, important topic. We are 2 middle-aged guys. I am Dave, and with me is...
Chris.
Yes, and today, the 2 middle-aged guys, we're going to figure out, I think, an important question. I think it's an apropos question of what's going on in the culture right now, the entertainment culture, and that is this. Is Star Wars still relevant?
It's a big question.
Yeah, is it relevant to you as an individual, Chris? Me, Dave? Is it relevant to the culture at large? And I think that we can have a lot of fun kind of walking through Star Wars and our relationship with it.
Yeah. I'm excited to talk about how we found Star Wars in our lives, and then talk about maybe briefly some of the history of it, and then the new stuff, because I think that is kind of the crux of this conversation.
It is. Because that, the new stuff is... You can love the old stuff, right? Mm-hmm. But if you're, the new stuff is what's going to move Star Wars forward, and its relevancy as a modern property that people care about is really dependent upon what's being made, right now, what's current, what's coming in the near future. It's all about the current Disney Star Wars
and overall direction.
Yep.
Is Kathy Kennedy and Dave Filoni, are they the right people?
So I thought today we're talking about Star Wars,
yes,
right? And we're going to get right into it because this is a big topic. We're going to spend a lot of time, I think, talking about Star Wars. But I thought it would be kind of neat to. We are not going to be talking about everything Star Wars related today. So, we're going to be focusing on the movies, the TV shows. We're not going to talk about toys. We're not going to really talk about video games. Maybe just a little bit about books is going to come into the discussion, but it's not the primary subject. So it's not all of Star Wars. It's got a real simple defined question, which is the relevancy of it into the future. But we have been in Star Wars for so long. I thought it'd be kind of neat to just have a slightly different opening question for us. And that is this. What is your favorite or favorites, if you have multiple ones, Star Wars video game? Try to get that out of our systems.
Yeah, that is a tough question, and I can narrow it down to 3.
All right. Well, I got 2.
Okay.
Go with your 3.
All right, I'll go with my 3. Number 1, 1983's Atari Star Wars, the arcade game. The vector graphics, you're in an X-Wing, you're fighting TIE fighters, you destroy the Death Star, rinse and repeat. It is an amazingly simple game, but darn it, it nails everything it tries to do so well, and I even have the 1-up arcade version in my living room. So that's how much I love Star Wars the arcade game.
And vector graphics always look good.
Oh, there's something special.
They don't age, right?
No,
They're
not
so
at all.
crisp and clean.
The monitors age, unfortunately.
Well, that's true. That's true. But they look good.
Yes, they do. So that's my number 1 pick. My number 2 pick is TIE Fighter. Number 1, I love the space sim games. X-Wing TIE Fighter, X-Wing Alliance, X-Wing versus TIE Fighter, even Star Wars Squadrons, the newer one that they did. All fantastic. But TIE Fighter is the best of the lot as far as I'm concerned. It kind of was the perfect time where the technology and the gaming merged perfectly, because X-Wing had some problems, and then going forward, I think they tried to do a little bit too much. TIE Fighter is a perfectly encapsulated space combat sim game, and it's just brilliant. So that's my number 2. My number 3 is, granted, a nostalgia pick, and that is Jedi Knight 2. Jedi Outcast. Got it. Yeah,
I kept going to say Jedi Knight Part 2.
No, I kept thinking Jedi Academy, which is the third one. But Jedi Knight 2, Jedi Outcast. That game, I remember buying it the day it came out, running home, installing it on my PC, playing the crap out of it. And that is the first Star Wars game to me where it felt like using a lightsaber actually had some kind of bearing in reality. And it's just a fantastic game. Now, I will admit that it doesn't hold up as well. Certainly not as the other 2 I mentioned, but dang, that game meant a lot to me when it came out.
I think I played the first one. I don't think I played any of the
first one,
second or third one. Or...
If you played the first one when it came out, it was like, oh, this is a perfectly fun game. But then, wait a second, now I'm thinking about it. It was called Jedi Knight 2 Jedi Outcast, but its origin is in Dark Forces, which was that Doom era first-person shooter. So they did Dark Forces, then they did Jedi Knight, and then they did Jedi Knight 2 Jedi Outcast. So it's really the third game in that series. But anyway, Dark Forces and Jedi Knight, again, show their age. They're doing a remaster of Dark Forces, which is supposed to come out pretty soon. I don't know if a remaster will save that game. But at that time, they were really, really good games. They kind of gave you that Star Wars flavor more than any other game released in that period.
All right. Well, I have I've got some similar ones, but not exactly. I've got 2. My first one is X-Wing versus TIE Fighter.
Oh, went for that one.
I did, and it was a tough choice between that and your pick, which was TIE Fighter. I just really enjoyed all those games in that series. And I usually would play as the Empire because the ships were better.
Yeah.
The TIE Interceptor, and there was a couple other ones. Anyway,
unless you were in a stock TIE Fighter, that was pretty rough.
That was very rough. Right? No shields, and yeah. But that game was a ton of fun. That was pre-internets.
Yeah.
Multiplayer. You could probably dial in or do a LAN play.
Yeah, you could do LAN play.
But but
nobody could do. Yeah, right. we didn't have access to that.
So just sitting at my computer playing that in a little 33 megahertz 486 SX. And
did you have a joystick?
I played with keyboard and mouse.
Okay,
I believe.
I did have a joystick for TIE Fighter, and it was a pain to plug in and get working back in those days.
Yeah.
But man, I loved it, and it was so complicated. Like every button on the keyboard did something.
Yes.
And by the time I played that game so much that I didn't even need the cheat card anymore. I was just I was just flying a TIE Fighter. That's what I was doing.
I love that game.
Yeah.
I love all those in that series. It was a great series of games. My second choice is also a nostalgia choice. It is for the Nintendo Entertainment System, The Empire Strikes Back.
Oh, good pick.
I love that game.
Yeah.
I thought it was better than the Super Empire Strikes Back for the Super Nintendo.
Yeah,
that was like
agree.
A cookie cutter. All those Super Nintendo Super Star Wars series games, it was the same game 3 times with slightly different graphics. But The Empire Strikes Back for the NES, you had a cool tiny little Luke sprite, and he would run around. You had some force powers. It was just it was a built from the ground up game. It was unique. It was big for the Nintendo Entertainment System. It looked good.
Yeah.
Had a really tough space fight scene where you're trying to take out the Slave One.
Oh yeah,
Boba Fett's ship.
We can't call it that anymore.
I guess you can't call it that. Did it get it got a new name? Didn't it?
Yeah, it's now officially known as Boba Fett's ship.
Okay, that's what I was thinking. I heard something like that. But yeah, I remember us sitting and trying to beat that stage.
Yeah.
And finally, we had a controller with turbo. I think we were able to use that.
That was
finally beat that.
That was an
Vader.
insanely hard level.
It was,
and I did finally beat that game.
Yes, I did as well without a Game Genie. Which
which I mean was no small feat. But every time I wanted to play through it, I would sit at the beginning and think, do I want to go through that Boba Fett level?
Yep. You had to, I mean, you went through a lot to get through the Vader fight scene, which is some cool.
Oh, it was very cool.
Scenes
Yeah.
And some voice samples, stuff that was just not typical.
Yeah.
For the Nintendo at that time. That was a lot of fun. But
That's a good pick.
Yeah, I love that game. So I thought we'd get the video game stuff, maybe get a little exercise some of the other Star Wars opinions, because this is a big topic here. We don't need to be throwing stuff. I'm trying to police myself because I know my own tendencies to just go nuts with Star Wars. So.
Well, I would suggest the next thing we do is we talk about our introduction to Star Wars.
Absolutely.
Because even though we've been friends forever, when I met you, we were both already Star Wars fans.
Yes.
So I'll go first on this one. Now, the apocryphal story in my family is that I was born in 1980, and 2 weeks after I was born, my parents took me to see The Empire Strikes Back. So I was obsessed from birth, essentially. Now, I don't remember that, of course, but I like telling that story because the ideas of Star Wars, the music of Star Wars, the character names of Star Wars were in my head from
seeped in.
Exactly, from basically birth.
All right, I'm concerned about something because we took our 8-year-old Eve to see Dumb and Dumber 2
Ooh, yeah.
when she was a couple weeks old.
Yeah, well...
did we break her by doing that?
You know, she's going to grow up and she's going to have her favorite series of movies, which are the Dumb and Dumber films.
And she's going to act like Jim Carrey and Jeff... No, wait.
Well, I don't act like Luke Skywalker. Come on. I mean, you know.
Okay. All right, good. You made me feel better.
But so I saw that, but then, of course, that was not any kind of like introduction. What introduced me to Star Wars is I saw the first film. We had it on VHS tape, and I would watch it and I would enjoy it. But my cousin, who I idolized at the time and was much older than me, so he probably would have been 16 when I'm 4, like that kind of an age gap. And he had all the toys and he would come over, and then, you know, just because he was such a cool guy, like he would leave, but I would always inherit a new Star Wars figure from him. That's or something. Cool. Yeah, something like that. And I still to this day have the giant original or it would have been 78, 79 Millennium Falcon that belonged to my cousin, and it's in horrible shape.
I remember that.
Yeah.
I remember when you were a kid.
Yeah,
I did not realize you still had that.
I still have that. So, so that combination really cemented Star Wars, you know, in my heart and in my mind. And then I would just continually watch the movies. I mean, I remember summers when I was in elementary school, and I would literally watch A New Hope every single day that I was home from during the summer. And so it's always been a thing. And I think I'll stop my story there, because there's more, like, especially when there was a huge dearth of Star Wars, which I don't think a lot of fans today know.
Oh, yeah.
But after Return of the Jedi, it just kind of disappeared because there was, aside from owning a copy of it at home on VHS, there was nothing.
There was nothing else, right?
And then the books... Go ahead.
I have a note here. I call that the Desert Times,
Yeah.
1984,
Yeah.
up to the prequels. Well, you got the books, right? But in terms of movies...
Oh, sure. In terms of movies,
yes.
But I would argue that it was the books that ignited the fandom.
I think you're right.
And then because those were so successful, then Lucas said, "Okay, I'm gonna go do 1, 2, and 3." That's kind of outside of the scope of this conversation, but I will say that I've been a Star Wars fan basically as long as I've been alive.
Well, for me, when I was a kid, I remember my sister, my older sister, had rented A New Hope and a VCR to play A New Hope on at some point in the early 80s. I'm thinking it was around 83. So I saw A New Hope on VHS from a rented VCR. And then shortly after that, I went over to my older brother's house and watched The Empire Strikes Back in stereo. He hooked up his VCR to a stereo system and watched The Empire Strikes Back on VHS over there. And then with my oldest brother, in 83, I got to go see Return of the Jedi in the theaters at the Battlefield Mall, at the Warenberg Battlefield Mall theaters. So I saw all of those right within the same year, and that was it. I was hooked on Star Wars. And Return of the Jedi in the theaters, the original version for a 5-year-old. That's a pretty awesome
I can imagine.
sight, seeing the Imperial Guards, and you just wonder they're cool, they're red, and they look pretty tough. And there's just something, I mean,
and they never do anything.
They never do anything, but the mystery
yes.
was so strong.
That, to me, that is the magic of Star Wars. And the original trilogy does that mystery so well, where they'll just have something on screen or they'll mention something in passing, and it just allows your imagination to go wild. And I think that's part of the magic.
So from 84 or 83 up until the early 90s, there was nothing.
Nothing.
That's truly a desert of Star Wars content. You had the novelization of the movie, which I read all those books. I know you did too, right? Yeah. The novelization of the movies. You know you're in deep with a movie if you go seek out the novelization of it.
Yeah. And you're like, this Biggs character does a lot more in the book than he did in the movie.
Or in Return of the Jedi, when Obi-Wan says that Luke went to live with his brother on Tatooine, it was Obi-Wan's brother, right?
Yeah.
So Owen Lars was not was not Anakin's stepbrother back in 1983 when Lucas originally wrote this all pen to paper down. Owen Lars was actually Obi-Wan's brother, which explains, I think, a little bit better why he disliked Obi-Wan so much.
Yeah.
But yeah, so you read the novelizations. You had things like Splinter in the Mind's Eye, which was Alan Dean Foster wrote, which was written just in case the Empire did not. It was actually going to be the sequel to Star Wars if they didn't get to do any more movies, I guess. I don't know if that's apocryphal or not, but there was just not a whole lot, right? And even like the toys weren't collectible then. I mean, collectible in the sense that they weren't, the prices hadn't jacked up and they weren't in every comic book store.
Right. You'd see them in flea markets if you saw them at all.
If you saw them at all.
And they were all just in a box. And it was like 25 cents a figure kind of a thing.
And then really, I think you'll agree with this, is that during that period of time, I read the novelization of the books, watched the movies, but until the Zahn trilogy came out, which was what, 1990?
92?
Maybe something
91, 92, something like
when
that.
those books came out, then, obviously the Zahn trilogy, which was written by Timothy Zahn, who's writes a lot of war books, I guess. I don't know what else the guy did. I didn't read anything
science
else.
fiction is primarily his wheelhouse, yeah.
And then he wrote a trilogy, the Heir to the Empire trilogy, which introduced Grand Admiral Thrawn
and the planet Coruscant
and Mara Jade, and clones were dealt with a lot in a very different way than what we got later on. But this was established as that extended universe, these novels, and it went from there. We got Truce at Bakura, Courtship of Princess Leia, Kevin Anderson's Jedi Academy.
It exploded at a rate that even a bookish Star Wars fan, I could not keep up.
Yep, hard to keep up with. And you'd go to the, I didn't buy every book. I borrowed your Zahn books, and then I went and bought at a used bookstore the big fat airport paperbacks of those books, and then I would check out from the library other Star Wars books when they were available. And I read a lot of them. I know you did too. But I consumed a lot up until the prequel time frame.
Yeah.
I won't say I read everything, because a lot of the stuff Kevin J. Anderson did, his Jedi Academy stuff, was not very good. Kind of disappointing, I thought.
Well, and not even, you can't just lay all the blame at Anderson. There were a lot of books. When you got to like the 8th or 9th published Star Wars novel, it started getting a little thin. I don't remember the name of it, but there's one of them where one of Jabba the Hutt's relatives rebuilds the Death Star, and I remember getting to that book, and I was like, no, I'm not.
Oh boy.
I'm not reading this one. And that's kind of when I fell out of the books. But I never lost sight of the films. Like we always had a copy of them, and I would just watch them constantly. And this is back when it wasn't cool, where if you told someone you were a Star Wars fan, either you got a what, or you got beat up on the playground.
Right. It's kind of like how Star Trek fans are treated today.
Oh, poor guys.
Right, but you're right. It wasn't cool. It wasn't like everybody walking around wearing Yoda t-shirts.
Right.
If you were wearing it, you would get beat up on the playground back then. It was a different time. And then
it was a more civilized time.
More civilized books for a more civilized age. The novels really did rekindle my love of Star Wars, and set the dial to 11, because I was totally ready when the prequels and the news came. George Lucas is making the prequel. I was like, I'm in, cannot wait.
Yeah.
And that creates the era that I would just call the prequel era. Very cleverly named.
Do you remember us seeing the preview for Phantom Menace?
Yeah, didn't we go to a movie just to watch it?
We went to a movie theater and said, we only want to watch the Phantom Menace trailer. Will you let us in? And the guy was like, yeah, whatever.
Yeah, I do remember that.
That was a fun time.
A lot of pod racing in that trailer.
It is a brilliant trailer.
It is.
I don't know if you've watched it recently.
I have not, but I remember
the way it's constructed is so smart. It makes the movie look fantastic, honestly. But carry on.
Well, I just remember getting so excited, the lead up to the prequels and what's it going to be, and before there was casting news.
Yeah.
And, you kind of fan casted it. Who do you want to be Dark Jedis? And that was back before the rule of 2 for Siths, which I think has always been a very stupid, lazy rule.
But I remember you were like, Ewan McGregor would be a fantastic Obi-Wan. And
Did I say that?
I was like, Ewan who?
Yeah. I don't know. Okay.
Yeah, you totally called that.
And he was and is a fantastic Obi-Wan. But Man, that was exciting. Oh,
yeah.
goodness. So I was on fire. It was in '99. It was Star Wars madness.
Mm-hmm.
I think unlike any time. I think that was even more so than now, when Star Wars is very much part of the culture, and everybody knows who Baby Yoda is and the Mandalorian is, even if you don't like Star Wars. In '99, Star Wars was everywhere. I remember ordering Pizza Hut pizzas just to get the Star Wars toys. I my notes here. Jar Jar Squishy. I remember getting a weird little Jar Jar Squishy. I don't know why I wanted it.
And after the film came out, it was Taco Bell. And
Taco Bell.
I ate a lot of Taco Bell.
And I also remember before it came out, buying the soundtrack and getting the movie spoiled.
Yes, the death of Qui-Gon's or Qui-Gon's funeral. That was the name of the track.
Like, what?
Yeah, I remember that too.
So we were very, very much into. Do you remember going to Toys R Us before they started, like the midnight
of course.
sale, when they stared selling Star Wars toys?
I do.
You bought a lot of stuff.
I bought a lot of stuff.
I didn't buy any toys that night. I think I bought. I know I bought the graphic novel of the Phantom Menace.
Yeah, you weren't into the action figures.
I went just to go, right? Because it was fun, and it was
we were
Star
just
Wars
hanging
thing.
out.
But I didn't buy the toys. I just I knew I would never be able to invest to get a meaningful collection. Do you still have any of those toys in box?
No.
Okay.
I actually, what I did was I sold. So the prequels for me as a dedicated lifelong fan, I won't lie, they were disappointing. And so I had all the fever leading into Phantom Menace. And I defended Phantom Menace like my life depended on it. And then when Attack of the Clones hit, I was like, okay. And
it was indefensible.
No, it just kept going downhill.
Yeah.
And I probably would say I appreciate them more now, certainly, than I did then. I still don't think they're great movies. But as the excitement wore off, I ended up selling almost all of that stuff. And I kept one just box of things that I thought were extra super cool. Like they did a limited Darth Maul figure where he had a cloth cape instead of a plastic one, like things like that.
Yeah.
And then my kids were so excited about them that finally one day I was like, you know what? Have fun. Go crazy.
Go play with them.
Yeah. So that's how that collection went by the wayside.
I remember being super buzzed about Phantom Menace and excited, and going and seeing it and having certainly issues with it, but also still loving it. And the issues are the same issues that everybody has.
Sure. Jar
Jar, Little Annie, the Gungans, right? There were, the fact that there was a Battle Droids Gungan fight scene that went on 20 minutes, it was like watching a bad cartoon. But there was great things in it. You had Qui-Gon, you had a young Obi-Wan, you got to see Yoda, as a Jedi Master, and pretty classy stuff for Yoda, unlike in the next film when he's hopping around like a crazy Muppet.
Right.
My Star Wars fire was diminished with every prequel.
Yeah.
To the point where when the third one came out, I'm like, okay, I went and seen it at opening night, but I was like, whatever. I was kind of checked out, and when it stunk, and I do believe it did stink.
I agree.
I wasn't that surprised.
No, by the time Revenge of the Sith came around, that was the only one I did not go see on opening night. I took an afternoon off of work and I went by myself because I knew this is going to be a sad experience. And that is how I experienced Revenge of the Sith. And I think the story is a hot mess. I think visually it's got some incredible moments. And I think this is going to sound so film nerdy, and I apologize. The sound design of the prequel trilogy is a masterpiece.
Yeah. The concussion bombs or the acoustic bombs in Attack of the Clones, the Django.
That is one of my favorite moments in cinema history because of the way that sound is played. Yep. And Ben Burtt was the sound designer of all three of them. Also, the film editor of Revenge of the Sith. Fun fact. That guy is insane. Earned every Oscar he's ever won. He's just a genius. What was my point? Oh, how I saw Revenge of the Sith. Yeah. So it had petered out for me as well. And then, leading into even more current stuff when Lucasfilm sells to Disney, if I'm skipping ahead too much, stop me, but when Lucasfilm sells to Disney and then they announce, we're going to do more, my excitement was basically zero.
Yeah. So at the prequels, when the prequels were over and I wasn't reading books, it was a very low Star Wars point for me. The only thing that was out at that point was was the cartoons, right? You've got Genndy Tartakovsky. I can't say it. The Samurai Jack guys.
Yes.
He had his Clone Wars,
which was
very small series,
which was brilliant.
It was short. It was very attractive.
Oh, it was so good. And it felt like Star Wars, which is part of my complaint with the prequels, is none of it feels like Star Wars. But his limited cartoon series, what, 6 episodes, something like that?
I can't remember. It was not very much.
No, it wasn't. But nailed it so well. That was the best thing that came out of that 9 years worth of cinema to me.
Well, yeah, because during that period, the cartoon era, as I've jotted down here in my notes, decided to give them all names. You got that. You got the Clone Wars movie, which I'd never actually seen.
It's not great.
It had like Stinky the Hut in it or something, and and that kicked off. Didn't it kick off the cartoon series that was
the Clone Wars?
Yeah. So you got another Clone Wars cartoon series, which was on for like 9 seasons, I think.
Oh, was it
7
that long?
I think it was 7 seasons.
Oh, I didn't realize it was that long.
And that's where Dave Filoni came in. That is where Ahsoka came in, and that followed Anakin and Obi-Wan through the Clone Wars.
Right. And that was actually the introduction of General Grievous, who was this guy that just showed up in Revenge of the Sith. And if you hadn't been watching the cartoons, you're like, who's this guy?
Yeah, I thought he showed up in Tartakovsky, Genndy's.
I don't think so. I could be wrong. I don't think so.
I thought he did. I thought because he was really menacing and scary there, and then.
I have not seen those since they aired, so take that with a grain of salt. But I don't remember him in that. I remember him in Filoni's series.
Well, so I know that Filoni, that was his period of time, right? So, and then for many years, that's all you got was his cartoons. You got Clone Wars, and then that ended, and then you had the transaction, the sale, as George Lucas would describe it. I won't describe using his words, but it was a sale that I'm not sure he was entirely happy with. To Disney, I mean, probably enjoying the billions of dollars he got, and no longer having the responsibility to caretake Star Wars.
He did an interview. It was the same interview with the quote you're referring to. Charlie Rose, that's the guy's name. He did an interview with Charlie Rose, and he was talking about the sale, and he said, because I agree, I don't think he was happy with it, but he said, I'm going to make these personal films. He made Red Tails, which trashed at the box office. It didn't make any money at all, lost a ton of money. He says, I'm making these movies, which obviously are not commercial. And he said, I've employ over 2,000 people. I have to worry about them. So if I do what I'm going to do, I'm going to run Lucasfilm into the ground.
Right.
And so he said, I'm selling it to Disney, and I want to make these personal little experimental films. Now, my complaint with that statement is I want to see George Lucas's personal little films, but since the sale, if he's making them, he's certainly not showing them. Yeah. but I do give him credit for saying there is a business that affects more people than just me, and it needs a home.
It needs a home, and he was no longer interested in having that responsibility.
Right. So he sold it to Disney.
Yep, and which, I think probably the best place for it to go.
Probably.
I don't want to be affected by my opinion on some of this stuff. Certainly at the time, I thought it was the best place for it to go. They would be wise caretakers of that universe.
Well, and if at the time, if you looked at all of the studios, which one's going to survive forever? It was Disney.
Right.
And things have changed since then, and there's some question to that, but certainly at the time, I understand the logic.
So he had done that, right? And then, the Clone Wars is over. The Rebels comes out. That's the first cartoon series, which is kind of it follows a new set of characters anchored by Ahsoka, which was Filoni's main character, Dave Filoni, the creative driver of the Clone Wars cartoon series. He's the same role in Rebels. It's anchored by Ahsoka. We follow in Clone Wars, who is Anakin's Padawan. And then she's got a group of rebels with her that followed in that cartoon. And then Disney, which I didn't watch the cartoons, right?
No.
So I didn't watch Clone Wars. I didn't watch Rebels. At the time, I did not. I watched some of it with my son a little bit, but I didn't love it. And I thought, I don't really have to worry about it. This is just the cartoons, right? So, this is never going to be important to the future of Star Wars. I'll revisit that comment in a minute. So we got the movies with Disney.
I have a question before we hit the movies with Disney. When Rebels came out, had Disney already killed the extended universe?
I thought it was pretty quickly after they made.
I agree. I think it was.
I think it was when they announced that they were doing the new movies that they said
They say okay.
the movies they laid out. They didn't lay out what wasn't canon. They said this is what is canon,
Yeah.
and everything else is the extended universe. So what that really means to the listeners who are not big Star Wars fans is that all the books Chris and I wrote or read, we wrote them. Oh my gosh, man, I was so busy at 14. All the books, the Star Wars books that we read in the 90s.
Yeah.
They no longer were part of the story. They were what they call legends, which is these extra stories that don't mean anything. So you had the House of Mouse basically saying the movies are canon, the cartoons are canon, everything else, the books, the video games, it's a legend unless we specifically call it out as being in canon.
But then Filoni in Rebels, and I know that you're trying to get to the sequel trilogy, but this bears mentioning. Filoni in Rebels took his favorite part of the extended universe and reestablished it in Disney,
in the new canon,
and that will become an important point.
Yes,
in
Grand
the future.
Admiral Thrawn.
Yes, that's specifically.
Yeah. So Filoni was going back, and he was establishing himself as not just the cartoon creative guy, but a big creative force inside of Lucasfilm for Star Wars. Period. And he was going back to the extended universe, and he was picking and choosing what parts could he bring in, and he would make it canon by bringing it into the cartoon Rebels. And once it was in there, then you knew it was established.
Right.
The big part of that was Grand Admiral Thrawn. There's other things that, and I don't know what they are. I can't get into the level of detail, but I know he's established other things. But that was a big part of it. But things like the Witches of Darthamir or whatever, it was a big part of it, of Ahsoka. That was something that was fleshed out more in the extended universe, and he brought that in,
right?
And he codified it, right? So now it's part of the Disney canon. So, and then you got the movies, right, which are going to continue this, and they're set, and that the first one, Force Awakens, and The Last Jedi, and then The Rise of Skywalker, set. What are they? 20 years after,
somewhere in that neighborhood, yeah.
And the Force Awakens, I remember that opening scene with Max von Sydow and Adam Driver's Kylo Ren. And Max von Sydow says, "This will begin to make it right," or something like that. Kind of felt like he was talking about the prequels, like, we're going to do a better job this time.
Because that's a very J.J. Abrams thing to do.
It is. And then that was a cool scene where Kylo is freezing the blaster bolt in the air. Kind of impossible, even with the Force. But, even Darth Vader didn't do that. He just absorbed it. He just absorbed it. But that was cool, right? And that whole movie, The Force Awakens, I was like, okay, this is super derivative. This is A New Hope, the same beats with different characters.
Yeah.
It's Jakku is just Tatooine with a little bit more greenery, little bit.
Right.
But I didn't, it was okay, right? It was like, okay, well, it felt like Star Wars. It looked like Star Wars.
I agree. I came out of Force Awakens very hopeful that this was going to be great. Now, I certainly had grievances with Force Awakens. I mean, for the love of all that is holy, enough with the Death Star. And I don't even care if you rechange its name to Starkiller Base.
Yeah.
Enough with the Death Star. It hasn't worked 3 times. Let's not. There's a reason it's not working, people. Let's move on. And I agree that it is A New Hope beat by beat, but I enjoyed it. And I walked out of the theater thinking, okay, you know what? Maybe we're going to get some good quality films out of this deal.
It felt exactly the same way. And I think we saw it in the theaters a few times. And I thought Kylo Ren was a cool villain. He looked cool. He sounded cool. His voice changing. It was unfortunate he didn't keep the mask on more. Yeah. Because the mask was, was intimidating and scary. And the whole idea that he was, Darth Vader's grandson who, worshipped Vader.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, that was an idea that they really abandoned.
Yeah.
After the first film, and I guess we can, not the only one, but he had a potential to be a really cool bad guy.
He did.
And then we got the next movie.
So I'm going to throw this out there. To me, it is one of the most idiotic moves in any business or creative endeavor where you as Disney say, we're going to release 3 films. Here are the dates we're going to release it. And, we don't have scripts yet.
Oh, it's ridiculous.
To me, that is the source of this problem.
Yes. Yeah, there was no architecture, no roadmap.
Absolutely not. And not only that, but it would have been one thing if they said, okay, well, JJ wrote the first movie and we filmed it and here it is, and JJ's going to do the second and JJ's going to do the third. But this idea of I'm completely handing everything over to a new creative team.
Ray Johnson, then Colin Trevorrow.
Right.
And everybody gets to just kind of pick up where they take the baton from the other one.
And it was so strange.
Yeah. How do you have it? It is, to me, that is, you can talk about the mistakes that Star Wars and Disney have made, Kathleen Kennedy have made. That's the big one.
Oh, yeah.
That there was no plan. There was no big vision for what Star Wars was going to become. And, they're basically saying that there wasn't by saying, we're going to have 3 different directors, and then Trevorrow or whatever, he rewrote his script, and he basically dropped out because what he was trying to do, The Last Jedi, made it impossible for him to do. And then the death of Carrie Fisher made it also very difficult.
Yep.
So then it went back to Abrams because, it's kind of like, well, you break it, you buy it, right? You gotta finish this out because it's a mess. I give George Lucas a lot of crap because he retcons this himself. He's always saying, this is my vision all along, and then he'll change it. But at least I know he was thinking and he had a vision, even if it changed. Disney Star Wars had no vision.
And I think bringing JJ back for the third one was maybe even a bigger mistake because it really was like JJ saying, okay, I'm not going to take the baton Rian Johnson threw me. I'm going to pretend that didn't happen, and I'm going to pick up my own baton, and I'm going to, and it was such a mess.
Such a mess. There's no way you were going to get a good movie after The Last Jedi. So I think we just, do you hate The Last Jedi?
I do. There are moments of it that I like.
What moments are that? Like the end?
I do dig the way Luke handles Kylo Ren. I kind of like when he steps out on the weird salty plains that's white and then red when it, when you dig it up or whatever. When he stands out there and the AT-ATs are surrounding him and he's just standing there, just one guy. That sequence I think is pretty cool. And then when you get the payoff and you find out what's happening, it's like, oh, well, that's dumb. But for that time period, that 5 minutes, I'm in.
Yeah, I it's hard to like that when it ended the way it did. And you had all the stuff leading up to that. Luke was acting like a moron. When he took the lightsaber, you had that end scene of The Force Awakens where Rey hands him the lightsaber. And then it picks up on that, and then he takes the lightsaber and throws it over his shoulder. At that moment, I was like, oh my gosh, what is going on? What, is this like a blooper? Is this the blooper reel at the end of a Burt Reynolds movie? Or, but no, the movie was, I think it was awful. I think it was a disaster through and through. I think everything from this ridiculous high-speed, slow space chase, Leia flying out into space and then coming back in. The Mary
Poppins thing.
The whole terrible. Using light speed ships as weapons. Well, that's the case. That just changes your tactics and strategy of space battle. Right? You just changed everything, and space battle should never be the same. Where's your high-speed missiles then, right? Light speed missiles, they should just be firing projectiles at light speed. It was stupid. It was spiteful. I don't care what Rian Johnson says. He says that he loves Star Wars and he was trying to just tell his own story. It was spiteful. And it was awful. And it absolutely ruined the new trilogy because there was no way to make a good third movie.
Yeah, you couldn't wrap around from that. No. Have you seen Mark Hamill's comments about Last Jedi?
Was it with the comments where he said, "This is not my Luke, so I got to try to find another way to play this character"?
No, there was a different one. I mean, basically that was his point, but there was one where he specifically said, I went to Rian Johnson and I said, I fundamentally disagree with how you are portraying Luke Skywalker. And he said, I am an actor and I'm hired. And if this is what you tell me to do, I will do the best that I can. But this is not the character. And Johnson basically said, well, thanks for that. Do what I said.
Wow.
Yeah.
He was obviously wrong because of the state Star Wars got itself into. No one likes the new trilogy. They only speak fondly of the Force Awakens because it did genuinely try to be a Star Wars film, as derivative as it was. But that second one's a joke. The casino planet is ridiculous. Everything. I mean, just everything about it makes no sense. Luke dies at the end. I think he overdoses on the Force. He tries to burn the books. None of it makes it just. You can have a Luke who is bitter and angry at the Jedi, but he's not going to be stupid. Because he's not stupid, right?
Right.
But they had him acting like a selfish little child.
And the moment where he truly ponders killing Kylo Ren.
Yes.
That's not the Luke Skywalker I know, you know.
No, it's not. Lots of mistakes were made. It's so hard. It's like, but I think that we don't want to turn this into a...
No.
Disney was in a corner, right? Because you have those 3 movies now. They represent the future. So any stories you tell between the old trilogy and the new trilogy, it's got to result in the new trilogy happening. So you're boxed in there, and then you got to use that new trilogy as a spring point for any future stories. It's left a mess.
And it was interesting that they were so adamant about what is and is not canon. And they were like, these movies will show the way. And then even Disney is looking at them and like, oh, this doesn't do anything. And there's huge arguments about whose fault is it? You know, was it Kathy Kennedy's? Was it Disney? Was it, 6 million other people? Who cares?
Well,
it was.
She is the lead of Lucasfilm.
But how much clout does she really have? I mean, here's my struggle with Kathy Kennedy. She's not a stupid person. I mean, her career is incredible. The history of movies that she has produced, they're the biggest movies of our generation, no question. And then suddenly to fumble this ball, that strikes me as very odd.
Well, she still has her job, right? So somebody's not holding her accountable. But she's also not frustrated enough to quit.
True.
So it's a kind of confusing, right? So if it wasn't her fault, I think she might be frustrated to say, you know what, this has turned out poorly and I'm going to quit so I can go somewhere and do good work.
Maybe.
But if it was her fault, I would expect someone to fire her. So I'm not really sure what's going on.
And then jumping ahead a little bit, the reported issues between her and Favreau, where all the media says this is the problem, this is the problem, this is the problem, and then Favreau says that's completely not true. I've never had any problem with Kathy Kennedy. It's you can't really speculate on any of that because we weren't in the room. We don't know.
Right.
Maybe in 30 years somebody will write the definitive history of Lucasfilm, and then that will get us to some of the solution. But all I can say now is that the stories did not come together for the trilogy. And there were a lot of people that acknowledged that, even a lot of people who had power over that trilogy. Has J.J. Abrams made a film since Rise of Skywalker?
Yeah.
I don't think he has.
And he wasn't a huge prolific director anyways. He was more of a producer, right, at that level, The Bad Robot. He still directed some things.
Sure. But he'd done some genuinely good films.
Mission Impossible 3 is my favorite Mission Impossible movie.
Super 8 was a great film. Small, people didn't, it didn't register, but I thought it was really well made, really well told. And then, there was a third one I had in my head, but it's gone now. So I actually like his Star Trek movies.
I like the first one.
That's fair.
I love the first
That's fair.
One. And I think I like the second one, and I think I might actually like the third one even better than the second one.
So the first one was genuinely good.
It was. Carl Urban.
Yeah,
gets the credit. He does a lot of heavy lifting.
The second one had some issues, and the third one I thought was much better than the second.
I think I'm in agreement.
Yeah, but so you can't even look at J.J. Abrams and say, well, he was the wrong guy to pick. Aside from really liking lens flares, I got no problem with J.J. Abrams. But it's interesting that the efforts Disney took to attempt to right the ship. And I'm not going to give them the credit and say they succeeded at righting the ship, but they've done some interesting things, which mostly has been on Disney Plus. I think that's the next thing.
Well, also, real quick, Solo and Rogue One. What do you think of those two? Those are the two other movies.
Rogue One's a good film.
Rogue One's a good film.
Now, I will say that the idea of what did they call them? They were supposed to be the one-shot films.
Yeah, I can't remember.
Yeah, they had a name. They're like, we're going to do that. I thought that was a great idea. I'm on board for that all day long. And I want to see the Lord and Miller version of Solo. I don't care if it's not canon. I don't care if it's not sacrosanct. I don't care if it's jokey like the Lego movie is. I don't care about any of these things. I want to see their movie, because what I got was just the strange amalgam of what could have been, and then Ron Howard picking up the pieces for Lucasfilm.
And doing the best that he could.
Sure.
With a movie that I think should have never been made. Nobody wanted that movie.
I wanted the Lord and Miller version.
Did you really?
And I'm not even kidding.
Yeah.
When they announced Solo and they announced Lord and Miller, I was like,
that's
this is
interesting.
going to be wild. Yeah. And I'm okay with them taking Star Wars in creative directions. That's fine with me, and then we could be debating, well, Solo is so jokey and it's so bizarre and it's off the wall. All right, I don't care. That was interesting. That was different. That was new. That's what I want to see. And obviously, Kathy Kennedy disagrees with me. Disney disagrees with me. And so what we got was a passable film. The stuff that really bothered me about Solo, this is going to be an ironic statement. The stuff that really bothered me was the goofy things like, what's your name? Are you here alone? And however that scene went, when the Imperial officer was like, oh, well, then your name must be Han Solo.
Yes.
In Ron Howard's universe, that's stupid.
Yes.
In Lord and Miller's universe, that might have totally worked.
Maybe.
And so I would love to know more about what was their vision for this movie and just how oddball and off the wall is. Because I will say the kid they got playing Solo, I can't remember his name.
Ed
yes.
Elhart? I can't remember. I can see a jumble of words in my head. There's an E at the beginning of the last name.
Yeah. I thought he was great. I thought he was really good as Solo. I thought Donald Glover was really great as
Ansel
Lando.
Egbert? Is that it? No?
I don't think that's it.
I think that's a name. That's a cool name, though.
Egbert? Is Egbert ever a cool name?
Maybe.
Okay. Anyway.
When I write my novel.
There you go. I'll read it. So I think the movie had a lot of cool things going for it. And reintroducing Darth Maul at the end, I thought, oh, that's clever. Because I've always thought Maul never got his day. But how it ended up, it's a terrible movie.
It is. And, if you go out there and try to find anything about the Lord and Miller version,
it's
there's nothing out there.
I know.
Yeah, that's interesting, right?
It's like the Monterey Jack Chicken Soft Taco. There's just no evidence of it.
It's been erased. They don't want you to know. Rogue One, I will say this. I really like Rogue One. I think what Rogue One does is it does not break continuity, it enhances it. Yeah. And I think that's a cool trick that they did, was they found a neat niche place in Star Wars. Yep. There's a story there, right? Just like right before Return of the Jedi, many Bothans died to get them the plans for that Death Star. There's a story there too, right? So they found this story here with the spies and the Ursos, getting the plans. And I think that is the kind of movie you can do. Legacy. There was a name.
Yeah, there was. I don't remember.
Anthology movie? No, it wasn't anthology.
I don't remember.
Anyways, but they found a way to step into continuity and enhance it, and not break it, but have a lot of creative free reign to tell a really great story. And so I love Rogue One for what it is. I also like the Jedi monks. I think they're the Force monks or whatever.
Yeah, my only complaint is I think the deepfake Carrie Fisher, not so great looking.
No, it was early
but that's my only complaint.
And then you had Tarkin.
I even thought Tarkin was fine. Like that didn't take me out of the movie. But there was something about Carrie Fisher. Honestly, I think they made her head a little too big.
A little too big?
Yeah, that's my gripe. But a minor gripe, to an otherwise fantastic movie.
So that was we talked about the movies at Disney, and I think you're right. The next step is the shows and what they did on Disney Plus, and their attempt to right wrongs, reset, and give people the Star Wars that they want through the shows.
And it was a brilliant move. I don't know whose idea it was. If you're listening, kudos to you. It was a brilliant move to do something completely on the other side of Star Wars. Like if they had immediately done Disney Plus with the sequel to Rise of Skywalkers or something like that, I think we'd be having a completely different conversation than we're having now. But they went Mandalorian and knocked it out of the park.
Yes. Yeah, that first season of Mandalorian, and then the second season, it totally rekindled my love for Star Wars. It's kind of like the novels did back when we had the desert, and then the novels came out. This Mando brought it back, and great. My favorite parts of Mandalorian, both season 1 and 2, are the one-shot episodes that are the episodic little views into him visiting a world and helping them solve a problem, kind of like Western.
Right.
I love those episodes because you just learn a little bit. You get to see that he truly is a very heroic character. You don't get to get too deep into anything. You learn a little bit about the world that the New Republic that everyone lives in. But those are really entertaining, fun episodes that don't require a ton of knowledge about the Star Wars mythology.
Well, I think you hit it on the head why I appreciate Mandalorian so much. I think Star Wars does very well when it it uses its framework to address other genre. And Mandalorian at its core is a Western. Yeah, and so to take that and to transplant it into a galaxy far, far away, I think that's tremendous. And it's a really, really good way to handle that story. And I think you could trace back and say all of the successful Star Wars has been putting a different genre into that Star Wars framework. I think the classic trilogy, it's basically a fantasy story. Or you could look at it as it's Joseph Campbell's Hero of a Thousand Faces story. Or you could look at it as it's a Japanese samurai film. You know, I mean, because all these things influenced the original trilogy. But to put that in a science fiction wrapper, to me, that's what really makes it successful. That's what makes it interesting. And that's what I identify with. So when Mando came out and it's the good, the bad, and the ugly in Star Wars, I was just like, this is phenomenal. This is the greatest thing I've ever seen. And I love that Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni were able to do it. And I even liked Mando season 3, which took a lot of heat on the internet because it was slow and it didn't do a lot. But I was invested in every episode. I was like, this is really, really interesting. So I think that was an A+ effort from Disney.
And I did not like Mando season 3. I didn't finish it. I probably should. It lost my attention about halfway through.
Wait, so except for the one episode that doesn't even have Mandalorian in it, the Imperial,
or science cloning, or whatever. Yeah.
I did not understand that episode. I'm sure that they're setting up something that's going to pay off in 16 seasons down the road or whatever. But that, aside from that episode, I loved season 3. I thought it was still great, and I thought it was still everything that I wanted to see from Mandalorian. That was just my 2 cents.
Well, then we got the Book of Boba Fett, and I really enjoyed it. It's got some issues.
It does.
But I enjoyed it. I liked, first of all, it gave us an explanation of how Boba Fett came back into the world. I think that most of the time when characters die, they should stay dead. But I think this one was actually a reasonable one for him. He could have survived that. And, him with the Sand People and all that, I thought it was well done. I liked him establishing himself as sort of the Vito Corleone of Tatooine. Was really clever and interesting. He was a mob sort of crime lord, but he was of the people. He'd go out and he'd talk to people, and that was well done. And it presented a new side of Boba Fett that maybe was actually, I don't know, maybe he was more like his dad. Maybe Jango was like that. I don't know. We have no idea. I don't know why I would even say that. But it was a different side of Boba Fett than this. He's a guy who just kills people and freezes them for money. I really liked most of that. Now, I think that it was the Vespa gang was so incredibly stupid. But what I heard was that was a Robert Rodriguez thing. That he really wanted the Vespa gang in there. So stupid. They looked ridiculous. I don't mind the gang. Just don't give them Vespa, speeders or whatever. And I also think that those episodes with the Mandalorian and with Luke and all that, those were not bad episodes, but it ate up precious story time that was supposed to be for Boba Fett. And I really don't like it when they do these one-offs that have nothing to do with the show inside the show. When there's just, when you're following something that's a 6-episode limited run and 1.5 of those episodes are taken up by a different character. It's a little frustrating.
I agree.
But I did enjoy Book of Boba Fett. I think it made Boba Fett a character that I would be interested to follow other places in the Star Wars universe. I don't know. I thought it was well done, smart and fun.
I think you've summed it up well. Part of my struggle with any modern Star Wars, and I will go back to Phantom Menace to now to encapsulate that comment of modern quote unquote Star Wars. Part of my problem with it is I look at it through the lens of what would I have done differently, which is probably not a fair lens to use, but I find it very difficult to separate myself. So you mentioned that he was the Vito Corleone of Tatooine. Well, very early on, I identified Book of Boba Fett. I'm like, like using genre in the cloak of Star Wars. Oh, this is their Godfather. And so when it started to deviate from that some, it lost me a little bit. And I think my big complaints of Book of Boba Fett is he talks too darn much.
Yeah.
I mean, he
talks a lot.
It's like, shut up. That's not the Boba Fett I know, and they captured it perfectly in, I think it was the first episode where Boba Fett establishes himself as the crime lord of Tatooine, and people come to him, and he doesn't say a word. He just looks at his buddy, the whatever her name was.
Shannick?
Yeah, and she does all the talking. And to me, that is the way to portray that character. And from things I've read, Morrison was he criticized that as well, and he was saying, why is this character, I want to cut these lines. And I don't know if it was Favreau or Filoni or somebody else, and they were like, no, we want you talking, this is great, this is good dialogue. And I would have much rather it been more pulled back. I would have much rather been more cerebral and truly been, okay, this is their Godfather. I think that would have made the show much stronger. But I did enjoy it. I thought seeing Cad Bane in real life was super cool. I always thought he was a neat character, and to see him in live action, I thought they did a good job with that. So I ended up a fan, even though it was a rocky start.
The next one I think is an important one. Obi-Wan series. It was just called Obi-Wan, right?
It was just called Obi-Wan.
I hate it. I didn't finish it. I got halfway through it, and I remember watching it on vacation last year. We had rented a beach house, and at night, when everybody fall asleep, I'm a notorious insomniac, so I would stay up and watch it. And I just remember thinking, this is absolute garbage.
Yeah.
I think it's canon breaking. I think that Obi-Wan cannot go in and meet with Vader in between Revenge of the Sith and A New Hope. I think that breaks the significance of that whole, last time I met you, I was but the learner, now I'm the master, or him saying that he sensed something he hasn't sensed in a long time. I think that's canon breaking. I also think that Leia, pretending now not to know him, like, you remember you served with my father in the Clone Wars, wink, wink. Oh, you don't know me, wink. Remember you saved me when I was a kid. We spent a lot of time together. It was a great adventure. I thought it was ridiculous. I thought we had more of the garbage Inquisitors, which are stupid characters. They have stupid lightsabers. They're always spinning. That move doesn't work. You know they're about to die when they start letting the lightsaber spin. It's like, oh, that's the thing you do before you get killed, because it doesn't work. I'm glad they didn't do the lightsaber helicopter. Have you ever seen them do that in the cartoon?
No.
Yeah, they'll stick their hand up, and the blade spins around, and they fly around because light.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
We're going to talk about Dave Filoni soon. I'm going to really unload. I just hate the show. I think the sister, she was hunting Vader. You went hunting us. You went hunting him, or whatever everyone said.
Yeah.
You were hunting him. What? He knows you're a youngling. He's Darth Vader. He read your mind. Stop it. This is ridiculous. And of course, Vader did. And the Inquisitor that she killed survived because lightsabers apparently don't hurt anymore. Qui-Gon is very disappointed. Like, everybody gets to live, and I get stabbed once by the devil with horns, and I die, but everybody else is living. I just thought it was stupid. It broke some of the last great things about the original trilogy and about A New Hope. That whole pureness of Obi-Wan meeting Vader in his sacrifice, and it broke that, and it infuriated me.
I mostly agree with you. And just for the listener out there, this is the first time Dave and I are having these conversations about the Disney Plus stuff. But I do mostly agree with you. What really breaks my heart about it is Ewan McGregor is such a good actor, and he is such a good Obi-Wan. And every single time he stepped in the role, he's been betrayed by the script. And so when they announced Obi-Wan, I was so ready, so on board. And I was just hoping that it was going to be a fantastic story where Ewan McGregor could play Obi-Wan Kenobi, and it would just everything would sing.
Yep.
It didn't. And I think this encapsulates what I think is one of the big detriments to current Star Wars, is that people will not let go of the Skywalkers.
Yep.
And I don't know why. They do not have to be the center of the universe. They do not have to take place in every single thing. We do not have to see them in every stage of their lives. I would even take that argument a little bit further and say Mando would have been better if Baby Yoda had never been a part of it. Because
I totally agree. It's not. I always thought that would be a very unpopular opinion, so I steered clear of that. Right? I felt it, but I never felt like mentioning it.
So it will be. It is a very unpopular opinion.
It is.
But and believe me, cute I got a stuffed Grogu on my desk too.
Who's that?
Grogu, Baby Yoda.
Okay.
Yeah,
I don't recognize that.
They
stupid
retconned
name.
his name. Yeah, it's.
I heard George Lucas pick that name. Is that?
I haven't heard that. But
John Favreau?
I don't know.
I think said that he allowed Lucas to.
Really?
He probably had one of his kids pick it.
Anyway, and sure, is it the cutest little puppet that you've ever seen? Absolutely it is. But not everything Star Wars has to have the Jedi in it either.
Right.
And especially a story like Mandalorian, even as much as I loved it and just spent 10 minutes touting how great it was, I think it would have been superior if they had completely just left that part of the galaxy alone and let some of these other things bubble to the top. I mean, they've canceled it since, but there was a rumor that there was going to be a Rogue Squadron movie.
Yeah.
I couldn't wait.
Yeah,
I was so
totally
excited.
that,
I was so excited by that idea. And they've just thrown it by the wayside. So when I was watching Obi-Wan and I was excited and I was into it, and he's working this weird little job on Tatooine and he's just trying to get by, and he's upset and he's depressed, and he's had a hard life. I was like, oh, this is really great. And then little kid Leia comes in and I was just like, come on, I can't, it doesn't have to be this insulated,
Right. It's not a small universe.
Exactly.
But it's treated like such.
Yeah.
And I think if you want them to get away from Jedis and Force, or have stories that don't have to involve all those things, I've got a feeling you're going to be mighty disappointed, because Dave Filoni is not going to allow that to happen.
No,
he has got a very small set of toys that he wants to play with, and they're basically the characters from Rebels, and every story has to involve them.
Yeah, and he's got some very interesting ideas of how to expand the Force, and I have opinions of that we're going to get
into it. Well, Andor, I didn't watch Andor. I should, because I liked Rogue One. It doesn't look that interesting, and I just need to make time and watch an episode.
The entire internet blew up about how great Andor was, and they always talk about one of the later episodes where there's a prison break, and Andy Serkis is in it, who, huge Andy Serkis fan, great actor, revolutionized motion capture, incredible dude. I'm happy to watch anything Andy Serkis is in. So I went into Andor thinking, oh, this is going to be perfect. Maybe this is everything I'm hoping for. No Jedi, we got a story with the Rogue One guy, and maybe it's going to be great. The first 3 episodes are so boring. I could not. It's the only Star Wars of the shows that I haven't watched fully. Were
you falling asleep?
Oh my goodness! Even my dear wife, who is much more forgiving of stuff than I am, she was like, "Does anything happen in the show?" It's, and I'm sure that one episode with Andy Serkis is fantastic, but I couldn't get there.
All right, I do need to watch. I do need to try it, because it certainly that concerns me, and the internet praise always worries me when it gets a little too much. I'm like, oh, this feels like maybe we're overcompensating for something. But all right, let's talk about Ahsoka.
Sure.
I feel like Ahsoka it's like a line in the sand for Star Wars. Like, if you want to go forward with Star Wars, you need to be prepared to accept the Filoni verse, the Filoni rules, the Filoni outlook on the Force and Jedis, and you better love all the characters from Rebels. You better love Ahsoka. You better love Sabine Wren, or however you say her name. You better love Ezra Miller. No, Ezra Bridger.
Oh, Bridger, yes.
Yeah, not Ezra Miller.
I was like, who are we talking about?
I wish it would have been Ezra Miller in there. All these characters. You better love the green lady with the things and the goggles that are up on top of her things. She doesn't actually wear the goggles.
No.
Because that's all he's only going to play in that sandbox. And all the Force mythology that I did not think I needed to know or pay attention to because it was in the cartoons. Ahsoka expects you to know all that stuff going in.
Oh yeah, that's Prime-centered stuff.
It is. I think it's a strategic error on Disney's part to allow that show to be made, demanding you be not just a Star Wars fan, but you also be a fan of those cartoons. It made their potential audience very small. And that's why the ratings are, if you looked up any of the numbers, compared to like Mando, I mean, it's got half of the numbers.
Oh, I didn't know that. Yeah,
because those shows were like Mando, in particular, Mandalorian, was that anybody can jump in, and like my wife watches it, my sister watches it. People who are not traditional Star Wars fans watch it.
Yeah.
Because it's got a real simple, very few barriers to entry, It's simple, easy to get into, and it deals with stuff that doesn't require you to have a whole lot of knowledge about Star Wars. For the most part, I think the third season starts to get a little deeper in that stuff. But I mean, Ahsoka just demands that you better be better have a master's degree in Filoniisms, and frankly, I think Ahsoka is an okay character.
Yeah.
And I really have an issue with that Anakin had a Padawan. That makes no sense. I wouldn't trust him to watch my dog for the weekend. He was an unstable kid.
Yeah.
And if you watch in Attack of the Clones and you watch in Revenge of the Sith, in between there he's supposed to have had a Padawan. He's a butt. He's a young butt in one. He's a slightly older butt in the other one. There's no way I would have trusted him.
Yeah.
With his own Jedi Padawan. So the fact that Ahsoka even exists, and some people think she's the greatest, she's not. But in this show, she can, she does a lot of standing and crossing her arms. The show, for people that don't know, and I don't mean to be so much talking, basically picks up around the same time frame that Mando season 2, and it follows Ahsoka, the Jedi who was the trainee of Anakin Skywalker, in her adventures in finding Grand Admiral Thrawn and a character named Ezra, who Thrawn and Ezra both went missing at the end of the Rebels cartoon series. And the show deals with her and her group of friends that are all from Rebels finding these characters.
And apparently she had a Padawan as well. In Sabine Wren.
But yeah, that was post Jedi Order stuff, so I guess it wasn't as official.
Well, I mean, they certainly treat it as official,
I guess. Yeah,
and the Doctor Who robot, voiced by David Tennant,
yes,
certainly speaks to it like it's official.
The punching robot, he boxed that other robot that one episode. The show stunk. You got. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
No, there were 3 things I liked about Ahsoka. Okay, I liked that it opened with a modern designed crawl. Yeah. I thought, oh, that's interesting. Cool. Good. Good on you.
There are better crawls.
You took
the one at the start of our episode.
Of course, better. But what can you do? But take a classic idea, update it. Cool. Nice move. The second thing I liked, and I mean I really, really liked this. The show looks phenomenal.
Looks pretty good.
The set design of it, in my opinion, better than anything that has come out since Return of the Jedi. They nailed that look of classic Star Wars trilogy 2023. I mean, they bridged that gap so well with the costumes, with the props, with the ships, with the set designs, and everything.
And the technology around the volume seems to be getting better. It's much less obvious that they're using the volume as the set. No, really, right. I mean that. They're compliment.
Yeah, no, you're right. You're absolutely right. And then the third thing I liked about it was Ray Stevenson. Yes. Phenomenal actor. May he rest in peace. It's so upsetting to me that my favorite thing out of Ahsoka and the most interesting story out of Ahsoka cannot continue because Ray Stevenson passed away.
Now, Ray Stevens, you're not talking about Ray Stevens, right? It's the country music Weird Al guy who sings The Streak.
That's not who I'm talking about.
They kept looking for him.
No. No, that's not who I'm talking about. Okay. Ray Stevenson, who played whatever the guy's name was.
Balin Skull.
Yes. So super cool bad guy.
And he looked like a Dark Jedi.
Exactly.
He looked the part. They cast him great
so well.
He only got like 7 lines.
I know.
Power.
But even the few.
Like, you want power? Yeah, power.
That's what is that? Do you want to say it again? Even the little screen time he got, like with his lightsaber combat. He fights like a medieval warrior. The way he moves his body, the way he handles his lightsaber, it was so novel. And in a situation where I'm so tired of the Jedi and I'm so sick of everything, and let's face it, the best lightsaber combat that's ever going to be put on film we saw in the Phantom Menace.
Yep.
So stop trying to outdo it.
You can't.
And so the fact that Ray Stevenson, whether through his brilliant acting or whether through Dave Filoni getting something right, brought something new to the table, I was so on board for that. And I was ready for, I would have watched 6 seasons of the Balin Skull show.
Oh, I would have much rather the show been about him.
Yeah, but
it wasn't really about Ahsoka either.
No.
To me, they should have called it the Sabine Wren show, because it was really about her and her non-arc All of a sudden, she became a Jedi.
Right.
Just
Well, she
know.
cut her hair. So
She cut her hair.
that's all
It was reverse Samson. She did a reverse Samson. Everybody knows about that. It's an old trope.
So I was not a huge fan of the show.
You're being kind.
There were moments, not many, but something else I wanted to say, and then I'll turn the show back to you. I feel like it's a mistake the more explanation you bring to the Force.
Oh, yeah.
And I think that George Lucas fell into that trap.
He did with the midichlorians.
Right, I think
made it clinical.
Exactly. I think David Filoni's falling into that trap.
Now, because he's made it too much like magic.
Exactly.
It's just magic now. They're Harry Potter characters.
Right. And so the witches of Dathomir, I don't care. Design-wise, I think they're phenomenal, but what they bring to the story completely removes what made Star Wars great. And you go to the classic trilogy, you can equate the Force with magic. You can equate the Force with religion. You can equate the Force with a whole bunch of different things based on what you as a viewer bring to it in the classic trilogy. In the prequel trilogy, it's all science. Yeah. And then in the Filoni stuff, it's all, like you said, it's all Harry Potter. And I think that is a huge detriment to Star Wars going forward. And unfortunately, I think you're 100% right that this is the path that Disney is taking. They're giving it to Filoni. He's going to be the leader, and it's going to go down this path where it's more and more mysticism. It's more and more explainable by these historic artifacts. Like, I don't know if you got into the history of the Jedi, where the dad has two daughters, and one of them is a light side Force, and one of them is the dark side of the Force.
Son.
Yeah, okay.
And then the mother, and then who was something else. Yeah, yes. I did a little bit, right, because I wanted to know what's a Mortis god? What are these statues? And then it was like, this is stupid. Exactly. This is all stuff he brought in. For the most part, Filoni has just brought in and has hammered, but he insists that this is going to be it, right? And I do, the religious influences that were in the old Star Wars had some Christian influences, it had others. Mm-hmm. This is just like, this feels like, to me, like Harry Potter.
Yeah.
And it's just silly, and the witches, they can resurrect people.
Yeah, and the zombie stormtroopers.
Zombie stormtroopers, and that one Jedi Inquisitor that they fought, when the Ahsoka fought and killed him, he just was like steam or something. Yeah. Was that a being that the witches had created? What the heck was that?
I know. And even though I liked Balin Skull so much in it, having him stand at the end on the statue, if I wanted to watch Fellowship of the Rings, I'd watch Fellowship of the Rings. I don't want to see that in my Star Wars. And so I don't know about you, but the root question of this episode of our podcast, is Star Wars relevant? I'm ready to make a call on that. How do you feel?
Well, I'm ready to make a call as well. So I think there's two questions here for me and for the culture. And I think for me personally, I am not going to go down the Filoni path, not because I morally opposed to it. It's not interesting to me. And it makes Star Wars something different enough where I'm like, okay, I'll have my old Star Wars, not because I'm an old man, not because I'm not, shaking my fist at the kids telling them to get off my Star Wars lawn, off my space lawn. But because it's just not interesting to me. He has fundamentally changed it. I do put it at his feet. I think he's a terrible storyteller. He's a terrible writer. And I think I don't think he's going to destroy Star Wars. It's still going to be there. But I think he's going to limit. I think he's going to make the fan base, he's going to divide it and divide it again and keep making it smaller. And you're going to have to really love what he loves, because he's not going to open it up beyond that. So I think for me, new Star Wars is no longer relevant. I've still got my old stuff. And that's fine. I think for the culture, it will continue to be, but I do think the fan base is going to shrink, which is not what Disney wants. They want more money, right? So I think that this will last for a while, and there'll be more resets and reboots. But I think that, he was brought on, Lucasfilm Filoni was many years ago, as an expert in animation. And if you want to keep him in that, great. But I don't think he's some great broad storyteller. I don't think he's able to architect a universe. I think he's just made a mess of it. That's my take.
It's a good take. I won't go as far as to say he's a bad storyteller, because the stories he's telling are competent. I just think he's telling them in the wrong universe. And so if the story of Ahsoka existed somewhere else and it wasn't called Star Wars, I might be super into it. But the fact that we have an established framework of what this universe is and what they're bringing to this plate of fiction, I do think he doesn't get it. I don't, and I think let me rephrase that. He gets it, and he wants to do something else with it.
Right. He wants it to be made in his own image.
Yeah. And more power to him. I mean, if that's what he wants to do, fine. If that's what Disney wants,
that's
fine.
what Disney wants, right?
So
yep.
Is Star Wars relevant? You have to say yes, because it's still massive. It still pulls in billions of dollars every time they release something. It's the only thing that's keeping Disney Plus afloat, which is strange because they've got all the Marvel stuff and they've got Disney's back catalog. But the only reason I ever hear anyone subscribing to Disney Plus is, oh, I wanted to see the new season of Mandalorian, or oh, I wanted to check out this Ahsoka show. So in that regard, it's relevant. Is it relevant to me? No.
Yep.
And sadly, it hasn't been for a long time.
I held out hope, but yeah, no,
Yeah.
I'm with you. I held out hope for a long time, but I mean, obviously, when the next Star Wars movie comes out, I'll go see it. It won't be on opening night,
Sure.
but I'll still go see it, hoping, right, that I get glimpses of something that grabs a hold of the things that I loved in the past.
Yeah.
But
Now, I will say, could it be relevant to me again? Absolutely. And Kathy Kennedy, if you're interested, I'm happy to work on scripts. I'm happy to give my opinion. If you want to bounce some ideas off of me, I probably know more about Star Wars than you do.
Star Wars sketch comedy. Let's write it.
Well,
The Kids in the Star Destroyer.
we would get half of it done, and then they would replace us with Ron Howard, and it wouldn't be as good. But anyway, that's where we are, and I think it's sad. Now, I agree with you. Am I going to watch the next series that they throw up on Disney Plus? I'll give it a shot at least.
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't make it through Andor, but I made it through all of Ahsoka, and actually, for the most part, was enjoying it. And then the last couple of episodes where the witches stuff really started to take over, that's when it lost me. But I'll still be there. I'll still be conscious of it, but it's not relevant to me. It's when I think of Star Wars, I think of 3 or 4, 5, and 6. I mean, those are my Star Wars.
Yep.
And that was the golden years. And I think we've been chasing that ever since.
We have been. We've been, successful with some of the books.
Mm-hmm.
I think the Phantom Menace always will have a soft spot. I'll have a soft spot for that. I really do like a lot of that movie. Not all of it. But there's just so much of it that's just could never live up to that. It's never live up to the greatness of the originals. But yeah, no, it's and like I said, I don't want to sound like an old angry man because I would love to see something new done well, but just what he's doing right now is not done well. It's just I just don't love it. And we did mention I would like to close out the Thrawn discussion, right? Because Thrawn was created in the 90s as part of these Star Wars novels. It's no longer a part of continuity, but Filoni pulled him out and put him in his universe. But the Thrawn that we've got now is not the same Thrawn. He's not as smart. He's not, and I think part of it is you can't write smarter than you are, right? So Filoni is not particularly smart. I really don't think much of his skills. He's not able to write. I don't think he can write someone as smart as Thrawn. So he ends up like in the Ahsoka series, like people are dying. He's like, good, I planned for it. Yes, I lost those troops. Acceptable, I planned that. Like, what? You're just saying that. You're a liar.
I thought the live action version of Thrawn was fine. It just fine. I mean, I think part of the problem with that character, and anybody who's listening who's read the Thrawn trilogy, Timothy Zahn's first 3 novels, will understand. Not only is it hard to write somebody that intelligent, it's hard to bring something that cerebral to a visual medium. So in the novel, you have the benefit of knowing what Thrawn is thinking, having him explain his plan to Captain Pelayan, who exists in the new continuity, but was absent from Ahsoka for reasons. I don't know. I don't think it was set up well, but Thrawn is still honestly one of my absolute favorite Star Wars characters of all time. And to see him relegated to this it's kind of sad. I'm appreciative to Filoni for bringing him into the modern continuity. I think that was a cool move, and if I had been Filoni at that time, I would have totally done the same
Oh,
thing.
yeah.
They're never going to be able to take those books away from me, even if they.
That's right.
Even if they escape print, I have a copy on my bookshelf. They're never going to stop producing episodes 4, 5, and 6. The level that they've been messed with will probably continue to change, but those movies will still be out there, and that's fine. So, in an effort to not sound like that old man who's saying, get off my space lawn, it's okay. I don't have to like everything. In my defense, I would also say the Harry Potter series has taken a really bizarre turn that I have no interest in when they started doing the Fantastic Beasts films.
Yeah, that's true.
I was like, no thanks, I'm out. So it's not just Star Wars that I'm a grumpy old man about. I think it's okay to be a massive fan of something, but then to say, oh, okay, well, this has gone a different direction.
I can't support every direction it goes to, right? Yeah. I would like to add one thing. Dave Filoni ruined my childhood.
Oh, wow.
No, I
okay.
didn't.
That's
I remember people saying,
oh yeah,
back
George
in the-
Lucas.
You
Yeah.
ruined my childhood.
Yeah, that is another thing that I struggle with. The Star Wars fandom is,
There's some toxicity.
oh my goodness, it's a wretched hive of scum and villainy.
Yeah, I'm trying not to be that way, right? I'm saying a lot of this stuff with a smile because it's funny, right? And part of it is because I would convince myself that I did not need to follow those cartoons because they would never be important. And now I realize, oh man, I was wrong.
that was the core.
Yeah, that was going to be it's the foundation for the new direction of Star Wars. So I think it's funny how wrong I was. I guess Filoni wins. He won a new cowboy hat that he can wear around. For those of you that have never seen Dave Filoni, Google a picture. The guy's always wearing a goofy cowboy hat.
Always wearing a cowboy hat.
We didn't even get into how every character in Ahsoka folds their arms all the time. They stand like that.
Yeah, they're very good at arm folding.
And that it's framed like a cartoon. Like everybody's kind of like on the same plane.
I didn't even think about that.
It is. And then Ahsoka the White, when she dies and is reborn, is now wearing white. But she's no different at all. It's not like Gandalf who went through and became a higher.
Well, yeah.
It's the same.
And the fact that
clothes.
we've got Anakin's Force ghost coming and teaching her. That part's a little rough to swallow.
Yeah.
Anyway, so here's... Okay, I'm going to do one more complaint. I promise we're going to end this podcast.
Folks, stay with us.
So the moral of current Star Wars is when you get to the age you want to be forever, turn really bad and do a whole bunch of terrible stuff.
But when you die, you go to blue heaven.
And you'll be 23.
Yes.
I don't understand that.
You won't be the disfigured, horrible creature like that you became, more machine than man.
Yeah, no. You'll be
committed atrocities.
You'll be a svelte 23 while Obi-Wan Kenobi's 80-year-old Alec Guinness, and I don't get that.
Yeah, it is there. It's problematic, right? Anakin probably should have went to Force Hell.
Oh, there's probably no such thing,
Yes.
Dave.
I probably overstepped.
He became good at the end.
At the very end.
He threw the Emperor into the thing, so he's fine. But it was, I don't know. When it was Sebastian Shaw at the end of Return of the Jedi, it felt complete. And
Right.
when it's Hayden Christensen, it's like, what?
Yeah, and I've felt that way for years, right? But at that point, by the time that happened, I'd given up because Lucas was going to do whatever he wanted.
of course.
I mean, yeah. All right. Well, I think we beat it to death.
Oh,
I think
that was
Dave
long.
Filoni's going to send us like a cease and desist and maybe like get a restraining order. He's very concerned about me. He's concerned that my rhetoric has gotten harsh. And
Well, I'll go out on a limb for you, and I'll say that there's no threat. Dave's just all talk.
character
It's
witness,
okay.
I am all talk.
But yeah, if you do want to give us a shot at doing a Star Wars series,
Yeah, Kennedy. Yeah.
we'll do it.
Yeah. Where can Kathleen Kennedy go to reach out to us to offer us an opportunity for a script?
I'm glad that you asked that question. She can go to 2middleagedguys.com. That's 2, the numeral 2, middleagedguys.com. And from there, she can get links to our Facebook. She can get links to our X. She can get our email, which is us at 2middleagedguys.com. And she can send us a wonderful fan letter.
Yeah.
That says, oh, guys, now I understand everything, and we're going to fix it.
I just fired Filoni. He's in the office crying.
Oh, I don't want
I hope
anybody to
that makes you
cry.
feel better.
Now I feel bad. Okay. maybe we could just split it off. It'd be like Filoni Wars and then Star Wars.
He can go work for Marvel. He can architect Phase 6, and why not?
I think Feige needs breaks, so
it wouldn't hurt him to. Yeah.
All right, that was the nerdiest episode we've done.
I think
without question.
Yeah, probably. I don't know. The TurboGrafx episode is pretty darn nerdy, but
that's a toss up. That's a tough one.
Toss-up.
But for any listeners out there who are interested, TurboGrafx episode is our number one downloaded episode.
Yes.
So we hope you're all Star Wars fans too.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Who doesn't know Star Wars? Whether or not you're a fan,
that's true.
It's immediately recognized.
Yeah. So. Which means to the world it's relevant. To us,
that's right.
Not so much.
That kind of answered the question.
Have a good night, everyone.
Bye-bye.